First, we're going to warm everyone. The Architecture Lobby was founded about 2 years ago to discuss labor within architecture, issues that are usually not discussed. In the last year, we really began to think about the manifesto that was produced, a 10-point manifesto that talks about 10 specific points that can change within architecture to make life better for architects. We began performing the manifesto with yellow bullhorns, reading them out loud at different venues, at the AIA Convention, at the Venice Biennial, at galleries and other spaces. The more we were doing it, the more they were becoming live performances. So we began to understand that one of the tools that we have at our disposal is performance. In this case, we began to learn from Theater of the Oppressed and similar theater processes that basically place small things out as a way to engage a larger community into discussions, a larger group, where the actor and the spectator kind of go away, and it just and trying to be as less didactic as possible, but create scenes from everyday life so that embodied knowledge can then be played out in real time. So we can learn people's real experiences, and then by the replaying, we begin to understand the systems that change, and perhaps what systems need to change in order to make that one point come to fruition. Everyone ready?
Hi. How are you? Good. Thanks for coming to the office so late. I know it's like 9 o'clock, but this is the only time we can meet. So.
We're just so excited to embark on this project. We don't even know what it's like.
That's great. So you guys are trying to build a house, is that right?
Yes. The thing is that, we were about to buy like a home, somewhere in the suburbs. We were like, that's so mainstream nowadays.
It's so mainstream.
And we were just watching 500 Days of Summer, and like architects are like so cool.
Yeah. I know, and I just, we want a different layout, we want a different style. We're so over the suburbs.
That's great.
Yeah,
well,
so,
I'm glad you think so, and I'm happy to be working with you. So yeah, like what are you guys interested in? What can I help you with? Do you want to see some plans, or like let's talk about a budget and a deadline?
Actually, we really want to see your architects. I only want to see the office.
You want to see the office?
Yeah. We really want to see the workspace and how you guys work.
Yeah.
We just are really excited about this project.
Yeah.
Well, I know it's late, but we do have some people working. They've been here for a long time, so just bear that in mind. But
it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, well, just take us through. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. We won't make it.
This is one of our interns.
Hi, I'm Carl.
Hi. Yeah, I'm Jesse.
Oh, hi, Jesse. How are you?
Lisa. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, he's fine. Don't. Yeah, he's okay.
20 more pieces.
Yeah.
Well, nice to meet you, Jess.
John, are you almost done with that or what?
Hey, guys.
What? How many coffees have you guys
Don't.
I don't know. I had to go. I just cut my finger.
Yes.
Oh, you're all right. Oh my God, that looks so bad.
It's fine. We have insurance. We have liability insurance.
Does this happen like all the time?
Why is there so much trash here? Like, what is this? What
No,
are these working conditions?
we just need to have a lot of caffeine to keep it going. This is how we keep the cost
Is
reasonable.
that dry blood?
No, it's
Why
paint
is
from
there
Like so much stress.
No, come on.
You all
He's
right?
passing out.
Let's go back.
Are you okay?
No, let's go back to my office.
My
Let's go back.
God, what is
It's
this,
fine.
Carl?
This is how we keep costs down low for you. This is how these people get experience.
No, Carl, you know what? David, sorry. You know what, David? This is not okay.
Alright,
I don't want to engage in this if it's gonna
I
hurt
really
people.
want a very pretty house, and I don't think they're capable of making my pretty house.
That's very noble. That's very noble of you. But every architecture firm works this way, and so good luck finding another architect.
We'll find somebody else. Thank you so much, David.
That's a token of love.
Really, this happens. Like, people have this very romantic idea of what architects are and like what they do. And I think also because they have this idea of us, like how we work, we've also kind of accepted that in a way. Like, yeah, you guys just do drawings and you do it in 15 minutes, and that is not real. And like in my own family, they're like, oh, Nabila, these friends of ours wants a fountain for their pool. Can you quickly draw something? Like, it'll only take you 15 minutes. I'm like, no, it doesn't take 15 minutes.
There are two barriers, at least. misconceptions in the public that prevent people from having any sympathy for that scene, though. One is the idea that what we do is easy, and the other is that we're paid like lawyers.
Yeah, we're professionals.
Yeah, so if it were the case, if this was an easy job, and we were well paid, and we're just choosing to work 20 hours a day, then it's hard for anyone to understand why they should care.
If you're smart, you do your work in less time, not in more time. And so we should be teaching for that, not the opposite, right? And there's a moral hazard, I think. It's weird how this is connected to academia, because what's happening, I think, is that professors themselves, their livelihoods and their prestige depend on the performance of their students. Actually, the students are working really hard many times because the professors are basically exploiting them for their own benefit.
Hello, thank you for meeting with me.
Well, thank you for coming. So you would like to intern at our firm. Tell me why.
Well, your firm has been a great inspiration to me throughout the years. I was hoping I could keep learning from you, but this time away from the books and, in the office, and really bring some valuable input to your firm.
Oh, I see. In the last few years, our firm has been receiving more applications than we can possibly handle. But we understand that the experience recent grads gain from spending a few months with us can help catapult their careers. So we try to hire as many interns as we can, to help the young architects gain experience.
Oh, that's so gracious of you. So what type of work do you assign to the interns?
It really depends on what we need at the moment. Most interns spend some time building models, but also making digital renderings. That is, as long as you have the necessary programs on your computer.
What do you mean, on their own computers?
Well, with such a flow of interns coming and going, we can't afford to have workstations for everybody. So they're usually required to bring their own tools, You own a laptop, right?
Oh, I see. What are, the working hours like? Are we gonna have to stay late, or?
You know the nature of this profession. The architect always gets the job done on time. Even if that means staying a couple hours late and pulling a typical all-nighter every so often.
Wait, all-nighters, so are we compensated for overtime at least, right?
No. Full-time employees are expected to work a minimum of 40 hours a week, but more hours are expected if you want to finish the job on time. Meeting our clients' scheduling requirements is the #1 priority. We must do whatever it takes to get the job done.
So if I work 60 hours in 1 week opposed to the minimum 40, I'm not going to see any compensation for that?
No. I think there's a misunderstanding. The position you are interviewing for is unpaid. Our interns exchange their labor for experience and practical knowledge. We like to describe it as furthering your education, only that instead of paying thousands of dollars to a university, you're gaining knowledge here for free. We like helping young architects get exposure to the profession, and it would be impossible to help so many if we had to pay all of you.
Well, I guess I see, but is there a possibility that the internship could turn into a full-time position?
Oh, well, right now we're not looking for any full-time employees, but if you excel and show your real commitment to the firm, do quality work and work more hours than a minimum, anything is possible.
I guess that does make sense. I am very passionate about architecture, and I'm sure one day I'll be just like you if I can.
There you go. That's the spirit. With that positive attitude, you're going to go far. Someone's got to lead the next generation of starchitects. And that requires people who understand personal sacrifices are just part of this amazing journey. We're so happy to have you on board. Now please, go get me a cup of coffee.
Right away.
And there's also something interesting in the replaying where you went with the bar and all that stuff. Where I've often wondered if there's a generational split here, where in the 70s, 60s, you could work for nothing because rent in New York, Chicago was cheap, and there was a possibility of growth, but whether that even exists anymore. Whether that's there's just way too many young people without jobs there, I just wonder if there's that generational split also.
Yeah, because, it really dovetails into this conversation about individualism, no? Like, if you negotiate your salary on your own, then you're perpetuating this competitive system by which you create, the value that is created collectively suddenly becomes privatized, and it becomes a zero-sum game. No, where if one person gets more, another person gets less. And that doesn't have to be how value is distributed and allocated. Doesn't have to be that way. There can be political, there's a number of political arrangements that can be put in place instead of that competitive model, or even just continuing with a slightly competitive model, but which involves some level of justice.
Okay, ready? Go.
Did you hear about the shopping mall project just fell through? I have a feeling our positions may be on the line again. We're always pushed around. There must be a way to secure our jobs better, to fight for our rights as workers. Someone should be doing that research.
Oh yeah? Can you elucidate how that would make things any better for me? Like actual benefits versus platitudes about labor research? My job isn't at risk. The company relies on my rendering skills.
Wait till your skills aren't in demand, bud. You might see the benefits then.
That's when I go get an MBA in real estate or something. Besides, don't you think it's ironic to be defending your labor rights as an architect than actually doing architecture?
Well, why are you doing architecture then? If you're just gonna go get an MBA anyways, why are we even here?
Yeah.
Beyond the living wage, I have no idea what you could possibly mean by paid fairly. I know what the market rates are for someone in my role. I know what I negotiated. I know what competitors were willing to pay and leverage that as well.
Fair? You think it's fair just because it's set by the market? Do you think that we can actually live on the wage that we're making right now? We've been here since like 3 in the morning.
You just gotta work harder. It's all about that. That's how capitalism works. Your argument is that it's beneficial to keep wages artificially high for a skill that is not in demand, and that is somehow good? I don't get you.
If you call my health benefits artificial, you're offending me.
Yes, I guess, the market is not for the weak.
Excuse me? What did you just say?
Yeah.
Who do you think you are? Do you think this is the law of the jungle or something? We're not in the 19th century anymore. Wakey, wakey. We're not in a system where...
What are you guys talking about? Just want you guys to be quiet, finish, because tomorrow we have a deadline, okay? And this thing about labor rights and whatever, like, you guys are all getting paid, you're fine, and then like some of your friends who are like doing really badly, so be happy with that. And
That's how you get to the top.
exactly. No slacking around, okay? No slackers. No slackers.
That was really funny.
A lot of times talking about architecture labor issues, it's hard to really evoke any empathy from people because it's like, oh, architects are well paid and yada yada. But I think we can start to relate really well to these other industries, like she was talking about the digital labor or just stuff that's happening on the internet right now. I think the fact that labor is changing so much in these other kind of creative industries, it's something that we can tackle more collectively and something that we're all we're struggling with the exact same issues, and they do demand a lot of attention in a way that if we just say it as architects, I think people might not be as interested in hearing us out.
Mm-hmm.
Look, Ren's Wikipedia page says he's seemingly endless reservoir of ideas.
People would say that about me too if I had an army of interns working for me around the clock to make a bunch of ideas that I could get the credit for.
Wow, I just never realized that all this work that famous architects get credited for doesn't actually come from their own sweat and genius, but it's the result of an organized and largely invisible system of student labor exploitation. So, what would happen if all of us unpaid, underpaid, and under-recognized interns suddenly stopped working?
Well, that might even put the brakes on the endless proliferation of architectural marketing publications posing as pseudo-research. It might even put an end to the meaningless, absurd, unhealthy work practices in these architecture offices.
Hell, it might even demystify these icon demigods as simply privileged, egotistical, and just bad architects. After all, if you can't even properly manage your own team, how can you be considered a good architect?
I'm sorry I was so mean to you guys. I just never saw it that way. I always thought that we needed to put 500% of ourselves if we really wanted to succeed. But now I realize that we just undersold ourselves for someone else's success just because we were chasing a name or some prestige. What are we gonna do now?
Get out of here and build a career that recognizes us for our work and compensates us fairly too, for us and for everyone.
Let's do it.
Because they're not plural enough, right? So how many models of the type of work that you can do, which is glamorous and you know, is prized, is credited as being important and revolutionary in some way in architecture, it's really limited. And it ends up falling into these usual characters and usual ways of working, right? And you can see that in even in the identity of the architects that gain this status. No, there's markedly not so many women and not so many non-white people, right? And so that's at one level, and at the other level, there's a more philosophical question of like, how do you want to live your life, right? I mean, you know, what is the ethics? You know, what is your life project? Even from the day to day.
Right. I was just saying, I think it's like bigger than that as well, because for interns, if they pull out, then it's, where are they going to get employment? You know, like they have their livelihood on the line. But then also, if they want to have this idea of being able to work for themselves, how are they going to do that? It's really hard unless you have a professional architect over that you're working under, which is the system. And so I think it's like a larger culture of being able to produce workable scales that people can interact with and be a part of that aren't as pressurized professionally maybe within the field. So that there's like an opportunity for people to have instigation and work without being underneath a licensed architect and underneath, I don't know. I just think, like having some sort of authority over your work when you're younger is a bigger thing, is a bigger cultural thing within the discipline.
To me, it seems really redundant if all of us go out and get our license. Like, architects have so much education, and there's always so much more that we could learn. And I struggle with that myself. Like, okay, should I get my license? Should I also learn the politics of how to go fund a project or how to run a business? It's like you could kind of work forever to become more professional or more experienced, but at what point is that just incredibly redundant and we're not out there actually making changes? I think architects kind of have an inferiority complex where it's like, oh, I don't know enough, but maybe like if we can rely more on consultants to know specific things, maybe there should be more kind of credential for people that don't get licensed but like know other aspects, so that every architect isn't like completely qualified in code, but if we can work together and one person's great at code and I'm good at this other thing, then we're not working and going to school forever, but we're all better off for it because we can get started earlier and still know all the same things collectively.
So we're, in one sense, we're suggesting further like, groupings of this is the type of work, I'm an architect that does this work, like, which, and I'm not saying I know like which is right or wrong, but that's kind of what you're talking about. Like maybe there would be licensure, like a certain type of license for certain degrees of work you do. But then it's also kind of, that would kind of be continuing the trajectory that there has been throughout history of us like further, like I know it's a division between first from architect from builder and then from architect from engineer, this sort of like more and more separatization that we have. And I just wonder like, and I know, and I don't like again, so I don't know the implications of this, but it's interesting that Peggy has explored what if we kind of break down the values further. That's just like another option. So we don't add more, but we take them away. And I don't know, like that would create a lot of complicated, confusing issues. It still questions then what's our role. But like, it's kind of, I don't know, it's just something that she's thought about.
But in a bigger sense, I think then the question is expertise. Because although, in theory I agree with you, in reality I also have busted my ass for over 10 years of intense education, and then the question becomes, what is my value in society, right? And what is the value of the expert? kind of this kind of larger open system society that maybe a lot of us would want. So I'm wondering if what we're talking about is something that organizes the people that are in the larger pool, that are actually may not be building a lot, but are still architects by training, both to organize themselves to like think about new ways of working, but also to then push those companies that are going to be doing most of it.
When you talk about union stuff, like it's so easy to dismiss in this day and age that you can literally just kind of be as aggressive as this boss character is and be like, that's crazy. A union? What are you guys talking about? That's so outdated.
But, and it comes down to like really simple issues too, because like, okay, so like think about like the unions gave us the weekend and 8-hour days. And what don't we have right now as architects? Weekends or 8-hour days?
And where it seems like most absurd is when you have an employee-owned firm, and I'm in one, but there is no wage transparency. So it's really hard. You want to fully buy in and you want to be incentivized by the fact that you actually have ownership in the firm, but it's handicapped. The incentive is handicapped, though there, because you don't have a good understanding of how the finances are being run. So everything is transparent in terms of revenue, and I mean, there's a ton of transparency, but there's a total hang-up, and I think a lot of it's cultural. I mean, not just within architecture, but generally within society, to not talk about what people make. And it'd be advantageous, I think, to pinpoint what is the pinch point on that. Why is it so difficult?
This is one of those spaces that has opened up, and right now I feel like many people are fighting, including graphic designers, landscape designers, and architects, is who gets to do what people are calling strategic design, design thinking, design research, all those words. But actually, and these two last points, that number 2 and number 3, to me are very much tied, because the way to get away from hourly, and the last scene didn't really deal with the hourly aspect of it, but the way to go with it is to sell kind of like, I can think in a way that no one else can. So it might not be just that I know how form works, but I can look at a large array of things and strategically think about them within a spatial context, whether that's an urban context or a smaller one. But I think so, because I have seen, for example, I think a lot of people in New York, and you can make more money because as a young architect, you either get small little pavilions where they're going to give you $10,000, or you're going to get a lot more to think about a larger kind of set of issues and how to organize them.
So things are going fabulously in our niche of the building industry, since we gave up the old deliver a building thing. In this joint architecture real estate business of ours, we don't even build anything here anymore.
Oh, really? How does that work?
Well, we bat out designs, many of them branded by star architects, that we then leverage to make our real estate properties more valuable in the market. But instead of developing what society needs, we sell stock options for each potential building to both users who are desperate for a name building and investors who hope to bet early on the right design and make a lot of money. It's fail-proof.
I see. But so where's the actual value then?
Well, if you mean by value or money, this is how it works. We sell the property once the architect-designed building, deemed of highest and best use by the market, has been identified. Nothing is ever built, but we make a fortune selling our stock in the buildings. Not to mention transaction fees we charge both the architects and investors. It's perfect.
So your understanding of value is basically to get rich at the expense of actually doing something?
My understanding of value is that the market will tell us what building is the most desirable, and then we facilitate that process.
What about social responsibility, environmental responsibility? What happens with that? I mean, it's just money, the issue here.
I have not seen a single socially responsible, environmentally responsible building actually get built.
So hang on a minute. So you're not building the hospitals that you pretend you're building.
No.
You've got a whole operation going on here with unpaid workers, interns, and artists.
It's great experience. Great experience. I'm learning so much.
Honestly, I get your business model, but I don't see how you can do it. Isn't this illegal?
No, this is the great new 21st century model. If real estate executives and developers, if they're all doing it, we're actually finally participating in the way that things actually work.
I really can't. You're a monster, and I'm gonna make sure all of you are out of business.
So I'm sorry, but I'm actually from the FBI. And you've just been recorded.
It's a perfectly
You can come in now. We've got it, guys, we've got it.
I love that word. And one of the things that I've talked about that, for me, alternatives to the market have become meditations on the public and the lack of public and the systematic dismantling of the public. And then it made me think that, we're arguing for solidarity within architects, and we're trying to open it up for a much bigger group than this and, become a little bit more welcoming, etc. But I'm beginning to wonder if some of those terms that forces us to begin to look at the public in a more serious way. That some of the same dismantling that has happened to our labor rights is what's happening in the larger, that's maybe a connection that we can make.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. I think that one of the aspects, this is the most, in a way, ambitious point of the manifesto in the sense that it's so broad, but ultimately the way I connect it to what we do in the lobby has to do with that you only change that big system with really an intense effort, an intense experimentation to enrich our political imagination. Yeah. Our political imagination has been decimated by basically centuries, decades, of extremely coercive social policies and a kind of ideological, just an ideological immersion into this idea that the free market is natural and that it knows best, and that it's a thing. It doesn't really exist. The free market is not free, and it will never be free because, in fact, it's saturated with politics. It always is. It always has been, and it always will. And so realizing that there is no such thing as a free market, but in fact a set of political arrangements and decisions allows us to try and think about it in terms of what can we do to change it.